My guest this week is a speaker, an author, and host of the Factual Feminist on YouTube. She's known as Base Mom by the Gamergate gang and just finished a 3-hour conversation with Joe Rogan, so I hope you have a little something left. Christina Hoff Sommers, welcome to the show.
Lovely to be here.
Do you have a little something left?
I do. I'm just getting started.
Yeah, so
3
did you
hours.
guys, you did 3, did you go a little over? Where were you with Joe?
Just 3. Just 3 in his little man cave there. It was a very cozy little studio.
Well, right before we sat down, we were saying how there's this new gang sort of that has appeared, sort of you, Joe, Milo, me, a few other people that sort of have magically connected, even though just months ago we really didn't know each other, and yet we're all talking about a lot of the same stuff. It's pretty cool, right?
Right. And I think that what we are is we're rejecting the cultural authoritarians. And so we come from different political places, but we share this commitment to freedom and, you know, just live and let live. What happened to that?
What happened to that? All right, so I want to spend a lot of time talking about the cultural libertarians and the authoritarians and all of that stuff.
Authoritarians.
But first, let's start somewhere else. Let's start with based mom, because that's the phrase that popped up many times, and I see people tweeting this anytime I'm involved in a Twitter thing with you. Based mom, what does that actually mean for the person that doesn't quite
At first,
know?
I thought it meant cool mom, and I was happy with that. But it turns out it means something very positive and just as good, but different. In the lingo of the gamers, and maybe they got it from a rap song or something, but based means grounded, authentic, no BS, as they would say. And so that's what I am, and I'm happy to be based mom. I like being a mom, which I am, and being based is obviously a good thing. So.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so let's start with the Factual Feminist. Let's go there first. I want to do a little history of feminism, but what brought you personally to be doing these types of videos and talking about this stuff? Just your journey a little bit.
Well, I've always been I was a professor for many years and wrote scholarly articles and books, and I wasn't doing videos on YouTube. I thought that was, at the time, I thought it was about, I don't know, cats. And,
it's still mostly cats.
It's still mostly cats.
Yeah.
And, but this young man came to AEI and wanted to get the scholars on the air, and he did videos with all of us, and then he came to me and said, we want to put you on. I want you to have a weekly show. Just come and talk. And I said, about what? What are you talking about? And he said, in no more than 5 minutes, preferably 4.
Yeah.
And how do I do that? But I started to do it, and I thought, okay, once a week, approximately, I will go on and correct a feminist myth, because there are so many. And I just wanted the opportunity to reason with people, to analyze some of these fictoids. We are inundated with misinformation, if you excuse the pun, just false information about women. They tend to exaggerate, these researchers / activists, tend to exaggerate women's vulnerability and to overstate the strength of men, when in fact it's a complicated mix of benefits and burdens for both sexes. And so when they say, oh, women are being cheated out of 23% on the dollar, and 1 in 4 being sexually assaulted. It just turns out these are ridiculous exaggerations, and the truth is entirely different. And so I just patiently try to, expose the myths. When I first started, my mother said, well, darling, aren't you going to run out of topics? I said, Mom, I will never run out of topics, because we have had going on, 3 decades of specious research coming out of gender studies, and it all needs to be reconsidered. Some of it might be right. Occasionally I find something that's not, been just twisted into a myth, and so I correct a myth every week.
Yeah, so before we dive right into the feminist stuff, how do you like being in this space? Because obviously it is new to you to be in the YouTube space and interacting with people like
Twitter.
This, and Twitter and all that.
Gamers, I've never played a video game, really.
Yeah, I mean, did you ever expect to be sort of a hero to the Gamergate community? I want to talk about that later too, but just being in this interesting digital new thing.
No, I didn't think I would. I remember a few years ago, before I was on Twitter, I said, oh, I'll never do that. I don't know how to do that. it was unapproachable. Well, now I can't get off it. It's so addicting.
Yeah.
But I didn't expect it, but I'm happy to do it, because here's the thing that I like about Twitter, is I don't just give a message. I link, if people are interested, I try to back up everything I say with solid scholarship, and I link to the best sources I can find, or to my own work that I've done for over the decades. So I link to books and articles if people are interested. So it's as if all of my writing has a new life.
Yeah, and it's also very validating, I think, to be in the space that we are when there's so much misinformation related to whatever, whether it's feminism or political correctness or any of this. There's so many bad actors, I think,
There
in this space
are.
too.
So many angry people.
Yeah, but for us, it's nice that we can be like, look, here's some information, and then we
Right.
can go back and forth when we want, and it's very freeing to me, I find. And then when I'm able to connect with like-minded people, I find it to be great.
I find it great, and all I ever wanted as a college professor, I never saw it as my position to sort of replicate my view of the world in the minds of my students. Heaven forbid. I wanted to open the world to them, show them the best that was thought and said on different contentious issues in metaphysics and ethics, as well as when I was teaching, occasionally would teach gender theory. But when I taught gender theory, I found that there was the closed-mindedness combined with a kind of a penchant for conspiracy theories, paranoid theories about the patriarchy that happens not to exist, at least certainly not in the United States or Western Europe. And I thought if I had my ideal university, I would have some radicals there, because you can always learn from people that are pushing the envelope.
Sure.
But you don't only have radicals. And in gender scholarship, it may be a bit of an overstatement, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
Really, that's all we have.
Okay, so before we get to all that, let's back up a little. Let's just lay out some basic definitions, because I do find that with a lot of this, people don't even understand what a feminist is anymore. You know, you have your first wave feminists, your second wave feminists, third wave feminists. Now there's things beyond that you've coined. So can you just break down some of the basic? What was the first feminist movement? Just give me a couple breakdowns.
Well, that would be the suffrage movement, and that was the struggle for the vote. And then after women earned the vote, there was a period of quiescence, and we didn't hear much from feminists throughout the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. Then it came back in the late 60s, early 70s, and that was the second wave. And it had work to do. There were a lot of just arbitrary barriers preventing women, holding women back. They needed to be taken down. It was obviously time to do that. And
so this was stuff more like in the workforce, things like that.
Changing the workplace, changing education, addressing things of, legally for women to have more defenses against harassment in the workplace and so forth. All of that, I was totally on board. That's just basic quest for equality. But what happened is that the second wave of feminism, a lot of the women in the universities were quite radical, and they were not about equality. They were not about, I see feminism, the best of feminism, it came from the European Enlightenment, and it was about the intrinsic dignity of all men and women and extending equality of opportunity and liberty and so forth to all. Many of them reject the Enlightenment, and they're not about freedom and freedom of expression, and they are they use their classrooms, I think, to promote a very rigid worldview about how women are preyed upon by men, and it's almost as if better things got for women, the more bitter they became. And I watched this from close up because I was teaching in the university. I watched it, and I kept thinking they would be discredited because their views will not withstand 20 minutes in a seminar room with some just objective scholars.
Right.
But they do not subject their research to scrutiny of objective scholars. They evaluate one another.
Right, so was this a strange example of where things could exist sort of in the academic world where perhaps these ideas wouldn't have played out in the real world?
Well, they didn't, and I didn't see them in the real world. And I thought they would be contained in the academy and then would go away. That has not happened, partly because of social media and these Twitter mobs and things. It's come into the mainstream, and now we hear these words like trigger warning.
Oh, we're going to get to plenty of that. We should have issued a trigger warning before we sat down.
Oh, we should have.
Yeah.
Yes,
Is this a
I
safe
am
space?
a walking trigger warning.
Yeah. Do you consider this a safe space?
I'm feeling fairly
Freaked?
a little microaggressed upon, but not too much.
Okay, so then that was second wave feminism, right?
So the second wave was
evolved into that, yeah.
But the second wave had a radical extreme, and that extreme became the mean because they got a monopoly on the professorships.
Mm-hmm. And that's what you would refer to then as third wave feminism.
Well, third wave is probably the intersectional feminism, or there are various names for it. But it didn't correct the excesses of second wave feminism. It took those excesses and made them even more extreme.
Yeah. Now, what would you say to the people that would say, well, all along that ride, even if they were to acknowledge some of the things that you're saying, all along that ride, things basically were getting better for women, so maybe there was some reasoning behind it,
There was some reasoning, but at a certain point, what you had is just people, it was kind of a power grab. And there were women like me, Camille Paglia, a lot of libertarian feminists, dissident feminists. We were just disinvited to the party. And students didn't have the benefit of hearing a range of opinion on contentious issues. Take something like the wage gap.
Yeah.
If you are an economist and you hear that Group A is earning less than Group B, you want to know why. They immediately say discrimination. They blame employers and the patriarchy. But if you do the proper controls that any competent economist would do, and you ask, well, how do they differ in any way? Do all the men, because when you hear that wage gap, they're just doing the average of all the men in the workplace working full-time and all the women. Well, men and women do not study the same top subjects in college. They do not work the same number of hours. Men on average work more hours. They take more dangerous jobs. Women are far more likely to take a few years out of the workplace or more. These are relevant to your earnings. So then what happens when we do the proper controls? And there are very good studies. The Labor Department commissioned a fantastic study that did all the proper controls. It gets to a point where there are just a few cents you can't explain. Now, it could be discrimination, and I'm enough of an equity feminist to worry about that if I'm being cheated out of a few pennies, or women are. But chances are it's not. Chances are it would turn out there's some innocent explanation.
Yeah, so when it comes to the wage gaps and things like that, so I watched a whole bunch of videos on it before. I watched the video you did on it before this, and partly what I think is what I think when I watch most political things or almost anything related to news these days, I never know who to trust.
Right.
That I watch these studies and I say, this study, well, why was it done this way? Who funded this? Who funded that? How do you, in the mix of all this, figure out what to actually believe?
What I do, excuse me, as the factual feminist, I try to determine, well, who's the best source? Who sets the gold standard for this research? So when it comes to education, nothing surpasses the Department of Education. Mm-hmm. They collect statistics, and they are very good. When it comes to crime, do I believe a feminist activist that tells me that we're all, the majority of women or a quarter of women are being raped and assaulted and battered or more? I go to the Bureau of Justice Statistics and look at what do the statisticians who do careful and highly disciplined statistical analyses, what do they find? And they find something very different.
Yeah.
And they find rape is a terrible, horrendous crime, but it is fairly rare on the campus. It is not 1 in 4 or 1 in 5. And so I present that. I show people these are what sort of objective researchers have found. These are what the advocates have found. Now, some people just want to believe the advocates. I don't understand that.
Yeah, all right. Well, I do want to touch on that in a little bit, but just to finish up just sort of the waves of feminism. Now, you consider yourself, and you coined the phrase, I think, equity feminist, right? Mm-hmm. Can you tell people what
So an equity feminist, I hope you are, we all are, is someone who wants for women what he or she wants for everyone. Fair treatment, no discrimination. It's basically comes, as I said, from the Enlightenment. It's classical feminism. It's about fairness. It doesn't even have to be called feminism. It's probably humanism or peopleism or equalism. Mm-hmm. And that's what I assumed most people would be for. Today, feminism tends to denote people who are carried away with male bashing. If I had to reduce it to a few sentences, it would be women are from Venus and men are from hell. They seem carried away with female chauvinism. I hate to say it.